Hello ladies and gentlemen, Top Pack Gaming Man here. I am a retro gaming connoisseur who is looking to cover every nook and cranny of console history, no matter how obscure. Last week on this channel we took an in-depth look at Bandai's Palladium console and why it failed to catch on with the mass consumer market. The Palladium is one of many different pieces of gaming hardware released by Bandai. Surprisingly, the toy company have created an entire cornucopia of consoles over the years, and in my opinion perhaps none are more intriguing than that of the Pippin, a system which was created in a collaborative effort with Apple. So, with the coming together of one of the largest toy companies in the world and one of the largest technology corporations on the planet, what could possibly go wrong? Today we are going to take an in-depth look at the Pippin and why the system failed. So, this ladies and gentlemen is the story of the Bandai Apple Pippin. Yeah! If you watched last week's video, you will know that in 1994 Bandai would release the Palladium, a 32-bit system designed primarily for infotainment and educational purposes. Whilst many consoles of the period would compete for a spot beneath the television set simply to play games such as the Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation, the Palladium, along with the Sega Pico, were I guess Japan's equivalent to the Philips CDI and Commodore CD-TV. Whilst all this was happening in Japan, on the other side of the world, American company Apple were also coming up with new potential ways to make money. We all know Apple today for being perhaps one of the most successful and popular technology brands on the whole planet. But the mid-90s, however, were very different for Apple, and as a result were in a very different financial position. The iconic Apple co-founder Steve Jobs had been ousted from the company, and as a result there was a lot of internal tensions as to where the company should exactly be heading, and key staff members were hemorrhaging from this corporate entity. So not everything was going well for Apple at this time. However, their conquest to rule Europe was going quite well. In fact, if I remember correctly, all of my school computers in 1993 were Apple Macintoshes, so their presence in the region was growing. From this, the man behind the success, Michael Spindler, was appointed as new company CEO. A lot of Apple's problems at the time were directly related to how much money the company was spending on research and development, in comparison to the return they were making and the amount of successful projects that would come from this. The rise of Windows was also continuing to put a lot of financial pressure on the company, so in order to try and recoup some of these losses, Spindler created something known as the Clone Initiative, a plan designed to license out Apple software onto third-party devices. With this came the idea of the Pippin. The Pippin platform would be intended to be an open standard, similar to how JVC shared the VHS format in the 1970s. Spindler thought that this would be a fantastic way to increase Apple's market share. Apple believed that over time Pippin would take many forms, including home telecommunication devices and much more. Apple did not want Pippin to be specific for a certain market space, as it would be created to appeal to many types of consumers and be shipped in a variety of forms from many different manufacturers. Whilst this was all happening, over in Japan, Bandai President and CEO Yamashina took note of all of this and was the first big company to enter talks with Apple regarding these ideas. In the early stages of 1994, Bandai would approach Apple with a pitch to create a system using this technology. In this proposal, Bandai wanted Apple to design an initial logic board, and in turn Bandai would provide both the casing and packaging for this conceptual system. Bandai pushed this idea hard, on the basis that it would be the fastest way to deliver the platform to the market, which would result in good return on investment for both of the companies. Yamashina essentially wanted to bring to the market a scaled down version of the Macintosh computer, which was simply for playing CD-ROM based games. So in many ways, I guess the proposed idea was very similar to the Amiga CD32, which was a CD-ROM based console which was based on the technology of the Amiga 1200 computer. Both Bandai and Apple would meet multiple times about the partnership. The deal was of further interest to Apple, as they were also looking for developers to help secure games for a successful launch of the Pippin platform. Throughout the back and forth conceptual phase of the Bandai Apple Pippin, Bandai had never really considered implementing internet capabilities for this system. After all, this was 1994 and yet to really become a priority feature for devices. Despite this though, both Apple and Bandai began to notice a shift in demand for such a feature, so as a result, Apple wanted to incorporate modem technology into the Pippin's design. As a matter of fact, only 2 years prior, in 1992, Apple had included GeoPort on their Macintosh home computers. This is a serial data technology that allowed software to emulate a modem. Including GeoPort within the Pippin system required a massive overhaul and design change early on, as the processor needed to be changed to a 32-bit PowerPC 603. This was the lowest cost option available to Apple at the time to allow internet capabilities. In December of 1994, Apple would announce the Pippin platform at the Tokyo Toy Show, along with their newly formed partnership with Bandai. Bandai had plans to sell over 500,000 Pippin units on a yearly basis, and the two companies promised that the system would be the forerunner of multimedia equipment, capable of bringing text, video and audio into millions of households that had held back from buying personal computers because of their cost or complexity. At the time, none of this seemed too far out of the question, due to the system's decent specifications and many capabilities that were ahead of the system's time. Unlike the Palladia, this new device was intended to function as more than just an edutainment device, instead also offering both cutting-edge games and communication technology. The system would eventually hit the Japanese market in March of 1996. The system was white-coloured and known as the Bandai Pippin Atmark, and was available at a price of 64,800 yen. The bundle would include a dial-up modem and come with 4 bundled titles. Holding the system in my hands, I must say it is probably the densest console I have ever held. The system is surprisingly heavy, topping the weight of the original Xbox despite the smaller casing. The Bandai Apple Pippin, as mentioned, houses a PowerPC 603 RISC CPU. This 5th generation console contains a 6MB combined system and video memory, along with 128KB of NVRAM. The platform came with the rather quirky looking Applejack controller, with a minimal 4 buttons on the right, reminiscent of the Super Nintendo, and of course a traditional directional control pad on the left. Further to this though, a trackball is located in the middle of the joypad, which is mainly used for operating in-game menus in the same way a mouse would function. This inclusion on the pad is essential, as many games were ported directly over from the Apple Mac computers, where a mouse for navigating is a non-negotiable. Like the Palladia covered on this channel last week, the Pippin would also offer consumers the option of using an infrared-based wireless controller. Ooh. Speaking of the games and other software, only 23 actual games were released across various regions. However, the system is both completely region free and copy protection free, meaning that if you want to fork out the large cost for a console today, you can experience this platform's software library for free now. The device essentially ran on Mac Operating System 7, which was obviously based on Apple home computers of the period. The game lineup though is pretty terrible, and the majority of games can be experienced on Apple home computers anyway. To give you an idea of how dire the system's library is, the platform's best selling and most popular title is Power Rangers Zeo vs the Machine Empire, which as you can see is a lot worse than the Power Rangers games that came out on both the Super Nintendo and Mega Drive before it. It is sad to see such a franchise take such massive steps backwards, especially when you consider that this game is on a much more powerful piece of hardware. Speaking of the Pippin's library, I plan to visit it in great detail in future videos, along with the libraries of every system I've covered on this channel recently. I am going full time on YouTube in 6 weeks time, so I have plenty of time to dig even deeper down the line. But for now, let us focus on this system's history and what exactly went wrong for it. Away from Apple's deal with Bandai, in June of 1996, Apple released a Pippin-based system with a Norwegian company known as Cats Media, which instead of targeting Japan and the United States like Bandai, would instead endeavour to target the European and Canadian markets. Apple were also in talks to broker a deal to produce Pippins with Mitsubishi Electric Corporation. However, sadly, this was never to be, although they would end up manufacturing Pippins for both Bandai and Cats Media down the line. As mentioned earlier on in this video, the goal for Bandai was to ship 500,000 Pippin units in the first year. The aim was to sell 200,000 units in Japan, along with a further 300,000 units within the United States. The Bandai Pippin never lived up to these expectations, selling an embarrassing 42,000 units worldwide during the system's entire lifespan. By 1997, the legendary Steve Jobs would finally return to Apple in a consultancy style role in an attempt to turn Apple's future around. And whilst Apple's leaders may have wanted Jobs to say, "Your clones are very impressive, you must be very proud," instead Jobs would choose to shut down the clone initiative completely, ending the Pippin clone wars forever. It was only a matter of time before Steve Jobs would become the company's de facto leader, and ultimately CEO once again, and we all know what this eventually led to. Once Apple stopped all development of the Pippin platform, it affected all parties, and as a result, both Bandai and Cats Media would later cease production. The Pippin endeavour would end in Cats Media filing for bankruptcy, and as for Bandai, they would sell all remaining units to a company known as Daystar Digital in 1998. So all in all, both the Bandai Apple Pippin and Cats Media Apple Pippin endeavours both ended in flames, and the system never caught on with the general public. This all happened for a variety of different reasons. The first problem obviously fell straight down to the initial deal Bandai and Apple struck between themselves. Part of this deal included all marketing being done by the licensee, so as a result, Bandai would need to spend $93 million marketing the system. In regards to both Cats Media and Bandai, Apple placed one huge barrier in both the companies' paths, and that was that the system was not allowed to be marketed as a computer, in case consumers would choose the Pippin over Apple Macintosh computer lines. Instantly, this would limit the platform's marketing scope somewhat, and the system never impressed that much on the gaming side of things anyway. Also, it is of note that by 1996, when the Pippin was released, the level of competition in all areas was quite frankly ridiculous for the Apple Bandai console. The Japanese market was already dominated by both the Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation, and the Nintendo 64 had recently joined the fray too. Even in the world of computers themselves, the field was becoming more and more Windows dominated, so the Apple brand was diminishing by the second. On from this, Apple were not able to secure many deals with software developers, so the Pippin was gimped to offer mainly just a small selection of Apple and Bandai software, which is a very similar problem to what Bandai experienced with the Palladium. So really, it is ridiculous they made the same mistakes twice in such quick succession. Maybe Bandai just had too much faith with what Apple could deliver on the gaming front. Further from this, the Bandai Apple Pippin launched at the ludicrous price of $600 in the United States, despite the fact that the PlayStation and Saturn were both available with more upside at a much cheaper price. The market research that resulted in the implementation of the online features was conducted in Japan, whereas most American consumers could not grasp the idea of surfing the internet using such a device at that point in time yet. To be fair though, if a consumer was savvy enough in 1996 to know how to use the internet, I seriously doubt the Pippin would have been their platform of choice to begin with. It was just too flawed for those of which enjoyed the finer things in life. In 1996, EGM even pointed out that a consumer could just buy a Sega Saturn with a netlink instead, and still pay $200 less than if they procured a Pippin. All in all, come to think of it, the Bandai Apple Pippin may be one of the most hilarious, ridiculous consoles to ever come into existence, especially when you consider that Apple's name is attached to the bloody thing. Apple may be known in 2019 for producing technology that is light, sleek, easy to use and attractive to the lowbrow mass market. However, the Bandai Apple Pippin was none of these things. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of the Apple Pippin, and more importantly, why it failed. Bring on the Apple Pippin Mini, I say. Yeah. Thank you for watching today's video. Which system would you like to hear me cover the history of next on here? I produce in-depth videos just like this every single week. So if you do not want to miss out, make sure you like, comment and subscribe. Also hit the notification bell to find me in your pocket on the regular. Finally, and last but not least, my channel Top Hat Gaming Man is funded by the fantastic support I receive from my amazing Patreon benefactors who continue to support the Top Hat Gaming Man Trust Fund. So shout outs to Carl Johnson, Shizuka Kobayashi, JD Robbins, Greg Hooper, Seabass for Great, Since Spaces, Kevin for Haley, Andrew Bazanski, Edward O'Reilly, Tom Elliott, Mark S. Hines, Quang DX, Sponge Mac B, Michael Baker and Hans Christian. All of you really help me out, along with all my other patrons too who donate $1 a month. So thank you for changing my life. Yes.